Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's Al Emery here from Momentum, and today's webinar is about the EXO assets module, as well as the maintenance of assets. So we're going to be going through a bit of an end-to-end example of the life cycle of an asset so that I can show you, I guess, all the key things that the asset register does, from purchase through to selling and writing off, depreciation, and also the maintenance side of things. The EXO asset register is actually a free or a complementary module. So for any EXO business license that you have, you are entitled to the asset module. It's a relatively small project to implement it. It does require a bit of setup on our part, and obviously it requires you to have an up-to-date asset register. And once you have that, your data imported, then you start managing the asset process. Okay, so you should all be seeing my MYOB EXO assets module. And it can be put on the desktop as an icon like the other EXO modules. And it also is usually accessible from EXO Business via the drop-down menu for utilities, where you can open or swap to other modules. So the navigation is fairly simple, and the look and feel is the same as other EXO modules. You have your list of assets. You can use the activities or task view that's available throughout EXO, and you can also use dashboards. And for example, this dashboard has a link to the ATO website for information about depreciation, asset analysis for assets that have been added in the current year, and assets that have been disposed of in the current year, as an example. All the dashboards, like any dashboard in EXO, are customizable, and they can be added, removed, repositioned by individual users. So when we're configuring the asset module, there's a couple of key things that we're doing. So one is setting up asset groups. And there's some common examples here: vehicles, computer equipment, land and buildings, and you can have as many or as few as you like. And an asset group enables you to set up defaults so that when a new asset is created within that group, it will inherit the right settings. So for example, sorry, folks, just muting that one. For an example, an asset with a particular, for vehicles, might have a default depreciation rate, and it would normally link to a specific balance sheet account where those assets reside, a depreciation expense account, and an accumulated depreciation account. When you're viewing your list of assets, you can obviously filter it by asset group if need be. If you have a large asset register, then it's obviously searchable. So commonly when an asset is entered or created, it starts off as an accounts payable transaction where you might enter an invoice for the purchase. And if that's done, then automatically when you create a new asset, the system will prompt you, it will look at any transaction that's been entered to a balance sheet account that relates to assets and prompt you to add that asset into the register. you then fill out the details of the assets. I've created one just a little bit earlier, which was a service truck, and automatically some of the information is populated via the invoice. So, for example, who it was purchased from and the invoice number. The asset number is an internally generated number, but the asset code, name and description are all definable in whatever way you like. Assets can have parent-child relationships, so you can have a relationship between, say, a truck and a trailer. I've got it in the vehicles group. I have linked it to a specific location, so that might be that's a customised list of locations that you can create where assets might be normally housed. You can link the asset to a custodian and add a picture or a photo of the asset. The system has added in the purchase date and commission date and the purchase value from the invoice that I entered, so there's not a lot of other information I need to enter. We can see on the Transactions tab, there's a history of all transactions relating to the asset. So this is showing the general ledger posting that occurred today, basically relating to the purchase of that asset. Like the other screens in EXO, you can have notes, history notes, and documents and activities relating to an asset. So from a depreciation perspective, that's normally an end-of-month process. And any assets that have not already been depreciated in the current period would be included in the depreciation calculation. You can see that this asset only has a low amount of depreciation, and that's because it was purchased today. So it will calculate a part-month depreciation. If depreciation hasn't been run for a number of months, then it will calculate and post the depreciation that's needed up to the current period. You can see on my system the post button is greyed out. That's because I'm using a demonstration module, but obviously in a live system you will then post that depreciation transaction. So that's going to debit your depreciation expense and credit your accumulated depreciation in the balance sheet. So it is possible to revalue assets. That normally would be the case for something like land and buildings, and it's possible to sell or dispose of an asset. So for any asset, if you want to sell the asset, you can basically mark the status as sold and enter the sale price. So this is a older asset. I'm selling it for $1,000. I can nominate to close out the depreciation in the year of sale. The system will then give you the option to create an invoice for that sale. And I can invoice whomever is purchasing that asset. So I can print and email that if need be, and that is going to post through to the general ledger as a sale transaction and calculate and post a gain or loss on the sale. If we're writing off the asset, then it's effectively writing off its value down to zero, and we'll create a posting accordingly. So we can see now we've got our loss on sale transaction posting through there. With a revaluation, you can nominate your new value, the date and the period that that revaluation is occurring in, and it will post to your nominated write-down, capital reserve, depreciation recovered accounts. So those are usually the key things that are happening from an asset, from a financial asset register perspective, and there's reports around all of those things: asset purchases, sales, book and tax values, book and tax depreciation. There is a couple of basic options relating to maintenance, but they're very basic. So what I'm going to be moving on to is showing you how to integrate fixed assets with serviceable units and jobs to track maintenance and also costs associated with maintenance, as well as running costs on assets. So the basic functionality is as simple as you can nominate a next service date, which you would do manually, and the report would then show you assets that might require maintenance based on that manually maintained service date. So that's a very simple, basic functionality, which might suit some businesses. What Momentum has done is, with our knowledge of how the serviceable units and job costing module works, we've integrated fixed assets with those modules. So, for example, this asset here, which is a service truck, the integration requires a little Momentum add-on that we've developed called Momentum Asset Advantage, and installing and configuring that module will add a number of extra fields to a fixed asset. So I have a tick box to say, is it a serviceable unit or not? And if it is, what is its make, model, class, unit of measure for its usage and servicing? Those are the key things that are needed. And once I save that, then I can go across to the serviceable units module and start to set up maintenance schedules. So let's have a look at that. I'll minimize the asset module, minimize EXO business, and we're in the job costing module. So EXO job costing has a serviceable units submodule, if you like. And a serviceable unit is basically an asset or a bit of plant or equipment that a lot of our customers use to attach to jobs where it might be a billable activity they're doing for a customer, but equally you can use them for internal purposes and track maintenance schedules. So the service truck that I have created in the asset register is automatically created in the serviceable unit register with the same code, same description, and its make, model, and class. When you're searching, you can search on anything, code, name, make, model, or class, and you'll get a matching list. So this is what a serviceable unit looks like. So it's taken the basic information from the asset, added the make, model, and class, and then a few extra things that you would do. So I have linked it to a customer, and I've just called it an internal customer because this is the serviceable unit module enables a business that does servicing of other people's equipment to maintain their customer's equipment. In this case, we're treating ourselves as the customer. We can have a service agent linked. If the service or maintenance for this asset is done by a third party, then that's basically a list of suppliers, suppliers and customers, in fact. We're recording this asset's usage in kilometres. Other assets might be in hours, and it's got an expected lifespan of 200,000 kilometres. Like anywhere else in EXO, we can use extra fields to record additional information like engine or VIN number, serial number, etc. And in this case, possibly a target utilisation, which is common in something that might be hired out. To set up a maintenance schedules, we have a schedules tab. Okay, so one asset can have multiple maintenance schedules. So, for example, this one has a 10,000 kilometre recurring service. So every 10,000 kilometres, this requires a service. And the steps involved in the service, I'm using what's called a template job. So in job costing, you're able to create jobs that work as templates. You can have as many of those as you need. So these would be the different service templates for the different frequencies and types of assets. So I've just used this one. In addition to that schedule, I could create as many others as I like. Might be a 50,000 kilometre major service. For a truck, it might be an A and a B service. So I don't have a template for that. I'll just use we'll make it the 200,000. Okay, so a service schedule can be based on any of a specific date, a specific usage level, or a frequency. What I've also done with this asset, so every serviceable unit has a serviceable history tab. And the serviceable history tab simply shows any job in the job costing that has this asset attached to it. So in some businesses, an asset might be used for chargeable work for various customers as well as internal maintenance. I've created a job for this one so I can capture its running costs, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So in terms of dealing with reminders relating to when services are due, there's two main ways to do that. So one is a dashboard. So the dashboard can look at services that are due for service, or assets that are due for service, I should say, based on either a specific date that is either overdue or coming shortly, or a level of usage. And you can have different thresholds that you enter in the parameters to say, look at things that are due within a certain number of kilometres. So if we want to say anything that's due within the next 1,000 kilometres, then that's showing me these assets. So the same type of data and filtering can be used to do email reminders, and that requires Momentum's workflow module. and it will send an email reminder to the custodian of the asset or a nominated person based on similar criteria. So if it's a service based on a fixed date and the date is approaching, then they're going to get an email. If the service is based on a particular usage and that asset is approaching that level of usage, they'll get an email reminder. So that normally goes to, so we can drill in from that dashboard to the serviceable unit. That's normally going to go to a contact person that you've linked to that serviceable unit, and that's the email address it would go to. So if I go back to my service truck, I want to create a maintenance job for that service truck. So I'm going to do that by using a template. So the advantage of using a template is it copies information from the template job you've set up. So I'll just quickly go through and set up this job. So it's a service, job type, it's in progress, and the serviceable unit I'm linking it to is my service truck. I want Greg to manage that service. It needs to be done tomorrow. And it relates to that service schedule. So why that is a good way of doing it is you can pre-populate the quote or budget tab with the parts and or labour that are going to be required and use that to print a work order. So we can see this is an example of a work order form where we've created a job, a service job. We're listing the asset that we're servicing, when the service is, when the job was created and when it's due to be done, and all of the parts and labour that a service operator might need to know about. And then they can complete their actual time, as well as record details about any faults or work that was done on that asset. So as far as tracking all of that, and I'm just going to change that to a T. Recording all the costs and time involved in doing that is standard functionality in job costing. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the job costing, there's a number of videos about it on the EXO Education Centre. But fundamentally, you might have some time that's been entered for somebody working on that service. So let's say it's 3 hours. And you might have purchased some parts in or taken them from stock. So we could say this item was in stock, then we've consumed it from stock. You wouldn't necessarily process that transaction the way I've done it. I'm just using quick examples to capture some costs. So what that does, if we drill back into the service truck in the service history, it now shows that we've got a service job. So at any point we can refer back to that job and see what was done, what parts were used, what time was spent. If a third party did the service and sent us an invoice, then that invoice would be showing on the cost tab. The other thing that can be done for an asset, and this tends to be done in some cases through the general ledger and having many general ledger account codes for each asset or for fuel costs versus rego costs, etc. And so an option to simplify the general ledger but still get the information you need is to have a running cost job for each asset. So I've got a running cost job. It's linked to that service truck. And when I receive invoices from third parties, like the fuel bill, then that can be entered to a code that will cause it to post in the general ledger to the fuel expense account. But instead of breaking that down in the general ledger by vehicle, for example, which some businesses might do, I'm using a job to break it down. So any running cost type item, insurance, rego, fuel, can be entered through the creditors module, but broken down by job to give that allocation of costs. We do have some asset reports looking at maintenance costs. So depending on the options selected in the report, it would only show the assets that you're interested in showing. So you can filter the report based on asset classes or even specific assets. And it would show the hours, labour, material costs booked to different assets or serviceable units from a maintenance perspective. Similarly, a job cost report by asset would show, for each specific asset, jobs that were done for that asset, what was done, who worked on it, and again, the costs associated with both time and purchases. The other thing that our Asset Advantage module adds the other thing that our maintenance module adds is the standard functionality for an asset or a serviceable unit in the normal module is that its usage, which usually would be recorded in kilometres or hours, is updated manually and there isn't any history. So if I put in that this asset had done 15,000 kilometres and then next month that's increased to 18,000, then I have no way of recording that historically. So we have added a data entry screen to enable that information to be captured. So our service truck, we can record at any given date in time, including backwards. So let's say on the 1st of the 9th, we might say its usage was 22,000. And that information could be captured in various ways. It's often on fuel card accounts. And I might say it's now 23.5. So that was done just so that the usage of an asset can be tracked over time and potentially reported against in terms of, say, a cost per kilometre or cost per hour of a particular asset. Okay, so just back to the agenda. We've covered off the financial asset register, how to load an asset, dealing with purchasing, sale, depreciation, write-off, and then moved on to integrating that with job costing and serviceable units to manage maintenance schedules, maintenance costs and running costs. And I guess the things involved in doing that is Momentum's Asset Advantage module, which integrates those two EXO modules, brings into play historical usage reporting and a number of asset cost reports that we've developed consulting with some of our customers. And if need be, the workflow module can be used to schedule email reminders relating to service schedules. And with some configuration, it's possible to actually automatically create the job itself, the maintenance job that you might need to do to work on a particular asset. So happy to take any questions. Okay, it doesn't sound like there are any questions. So that being the case, thank you everybody who attended. I hope you found it informative. If you already have those modules, that might give you some ideas about how you can utilize them a little more. If you don't have them, where we will be happy to talk to you about what's involved in getting them set up and implemented. I do have a question from Shannon, but the text that you put through, Shannon, has disappeared. So what I might do is contact you directly, and if you have any questions, we can talk about them then. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time, and we will let you know what our next webinar topic will be in October. Thank you.